Welcome to the PDA Parenting Podcast. This show will be dedicated to supporting parents raising kids with PDA autism. I'm your host, Amy Kotha, a parent coach and a mom to a PDAer myself. This podcast is here to provide you with practical insights, real-life experiences, and expert guidance to help you better understand your child and to parent from a place of connection, empathy, and understanding. Whether you're new to PDA or you're already familiar with the journey, you're in the right place. Welcome back to the PDA Parenting Podcast. I'm Amy Kotha, a parent coach for parents who are raising PDA autistic kids. And today we're going to talk about something that can be very personal, and I feel like it's incredibly important. And that is the feeling of being trapped. Now, if you're parenting a PDA child, the chances are that you have experienced this from both sides. So you have a child who feels trapped by demands, by expectations, by school, by authority, and heck, by their own anxious thoughts. And then on the other hand, you feel trapped as well by parenting struggles, by the constant emotional dysregulation that's happening all around you, and by the feeling maybe that nothing is working. So today we're going to break it all down. We'll talk about what feeling trapped actually means to a PDA kid, how it shows up at different ages, why parents feel trapped as well. We'll talk a little about the nervous system, and then most importantly, how can we help our kids and ourselves find more freedom? So let's dive in. For a PDA child, feeling trapped isn't about being physically stuck somewhere. It's about a lack of control or autonomy or freedom. They feel trapped by this inability to make their own decisions. They are living in an environment that is filled with constant demands. They're in a world that doesn't hear them. And frankly, let's be real, they are very rarely respected. They are also feeling trapped by their own emotions and their own thoughts. So let's break this down a little by age group because young children in the 5 to 12 years old range process a little differently than an adolescent would. So let's start with those younger kids. What trapped feels like for them is being told when to wake up, when to eat, when to sleep, when to go to school. And then they go to school and now they have no say in those school rules. You sit here, you do this, you raise your hand. You can't go to the restroom without raising your hand and asking. You can only be gone for a certain amount of time. They're also often in a school structure that doesn't consider their needs. So there'll be things like rewards and behavior charts, moving that clip from green to yellow to red. And then if they get on red, they have a consequence or they lose some type of privilege, which is often something they need in their body, which would be recess. Sometimes they have to sit through silent lunches when they need to, get rid of that stress energy that they're carrying. And now they have to be quiet. Also, forced participation. I don't know about you, but I had anxiety growing up myself, and being in a class and knowing that participation was forced and maybe, you were going student by student down the rows of desks to get to you to answer a question in the future. So you're looking and counting ahead to see which question you're going to have to answer and then trying to look it up. And then for one thing, you're just in a horrible state of anxiety. You can't learn. You're not listening to anything that anyone else is talking about. All you're concentrating on is this one little thing. And then sometimes myself, by the time they got to me, I was a good student. I normally knew what was going on and how to answer the question, but I would be so anxious that sometimes I just said I didn't know so that they would pass me by. So that's hard. And these kids in general, but definitely our kids, they often have a very hard time being able to articulate what they feel, especially when those emotions are too big or too abstract. So they get trapped in this kind of emotional trap that they can't talk about. Kids this age can also feel trapped by health issues or sensory issues. And then the therapies, the doctor appointments, the tests, the procedures, all of these things that are required to help them feel better, they feel like an invasion. My daughter Maya, once she became a teenager and she was able to start putting more words to what she was feeling, used to tell me, No one is ever going to listen to me because I'm just a kid. Just a kid. I heard that so many times. But she had been told over and over and over that her thoughts didn't matter because she wasn't an adult. So just take a second and imagine how invalidating that must feel. And frankly, she continues to carry trauma from that today, even now at age 19. So let's talk about teenagers. Think about age 13 to 18. So, what does trap feel like to them? Well, for one thing, school becomes even harder. There are higher expectations and more pressure. They are constantly warned that their grades and their behavior now are going to affect their future. And they're not going to get into college, or college will be so difficult for them. My daughter always struggled as well with a few teachers in high school who began the semesters with very strong warnings about how hard the class was going to be and how much work would be required to keep up. And then they would advise everyone to drop out now if they weren't prepared for a college level class. They had very high expectations. And the issue was not the difficulty of the class or even the expectations, but just these words would trigger her anxiety and her self doubt and lead to this massive amount of ruminating catastrophic thoughts. And that would make the class so much more difficult than in reality it actually was. During adolescence, social rules, of course, are often more complex as well, and the fear of rejection grows. Many of our neurodivergent kids, especially it seems PDA kids, are susceptible to something that is called rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. And that is a condition that's characterized by an extreme sensitivity to perceived rejection or even criticism. So when they're experiencing RSD, they get very intense emotional distress, like shame, guilt, anxiety, depression, in response to what might just be a very minor slight or just a perceived failure, not an actual failure. And it can look like intense emotional reactions, low self esteem, self doubt, fear of social situations. They might overreact to negative feedback, um, have difficulty managing their emotions, and you might even see people pleasing behaviors or even complete withdrawal from social interactions. So there's a lot that comes along with that, and it's something that as parents, we need to keep an eye out for. Adults also are constantly warning adolescents about the future. I know I've been guilty of this. I try hard not to, but it's so difficult because it's such a piece that's integrated into our society. But adults are always telling them, you have to do good in school, you have to do well, or you won't succeed. You're not going to get into the best colleges, you're not going to get the best job, you won't make money, you're going to live under a bridge, right? Like so many things. And it's not just parents. I know when my kids see family, friends, or even extended family members, sometimes the other people don't mean anything by it. And often they're kind of joking, but they say these things to the kids. But our kids tend to perceive these as threats. And then it can lead to, lead over time to meltdowns and major anxiety episodes. And another thing that happens in adolescence is turning 18, which not very much happens when you turn 18. My daughter was so stressed out about this, and it was just another day. But our society, again, makes a big, big deal about turning 18. It's like suddenly you're expected to be completely independent when you haven't been given the tools to be independent yet. Some of these kids are still in high school. So there's several things that we don't automatically think about, but that our kids hear and it gets stuck in there, and they can often have ruminating thoughts about these things. And think again about the adolescent years and identity struggles. That's the time in your life where you're really starting to try to figure out who you are. So, how does being PDA affect who they are? Adolescence is this time where a person experiments with their identity and their values, and they're really working on developing their sense of self. So, when they're coming to terms with a diagnosis and they're learning about their neurodivergency, all of these things also come into play during that time and make things a little bit harder. So, also note that PDA teens, even without a diagnosis of OCD, which can definitely be a comorbid condition, but even without that diagnosis, they often ruminate and feel trapped inside their own thoughts. They can get stuck in these anxiety loops and they feel like they don't have any control over their minds. So that actually brings me to the next point that I wanted to talk about, which is how the nervous system creates trapped feelings. Because the trapped feelings aren't just in their minds, it's also happening in their bodies. If you know anything about neuroception, and I don't have time to go into nervous system and neuroception much today, I'll do that in a different podcast. But neuroception is the body's automatic danger or threat detection system that resides in the brain. And it is constantly scanning the environment for safety. It scans the internal environment, it scans the external environment, and then it also scans in between, which would be in relationship or in between two people. We also know that PDA kids have a very hypersensitive neuroception. And this means that their nervous system is interpreting situations as dangerous, even when they're not. And it often leads to increased anxiety, increased reactivity, even in what seems to be very safe situations. Essentially, it's a hypervigilant state where someone is constantly scanning for potential dangers even when none exist. So, what this can do is lead to feeling trapped within their own frustration. They can also feel trapped inside their own frustration with lagging skills or executive functioning struggles. They can feel trapped inside chronic health problems and medication routines. Many of our kids have comorbid conditions that come along with autism. They might have not just ADHD, which is very common, but they can have physical issues like hypermobility spectrum disorders, Ehlers-Danlos, POTS syndrome. There are a multitude. So that can definitely become an issue. And then they can feel trapped socially. Peer groups, teachers, parents, everyone seems to have rules. And this can lead our PDA kids to shut down, to lash out, or to just completely avoid situations. So their brain is telling them that they are under threat, and that is often what is causing these reactions. So, why do parents feel trapped? As parents, we're not immune to this feeling either. We feel trapped. And what does that look like? Well, it can feel like nothing is working and you're constantly walking on eggshells. I walked on eggshells for years until I started to work my way out of this. It's so easy to get to that place. We are working to advocate at school, but being dismissed. And sometimes we're the only parent in the household who gets it. Maybe our partner doesn't believe in PDA. Maybe our extended family doesn't believe in PDA. And then you feel like you have your entire life that is revolving around your PDA child while your own well being is put on the back burner. And this creates a cycle. So the more trapped we feel, the more desperate we become to fix things, and the more our kids push back because they feel our anxiety. So we really need to find ways to break this cycle. So now let's talk about solutions. What can we do? Well, I have 5 ideas I'm going to share with you. Number 1, scaffold but step back. What does that mean? Well, young kids need us to advocate, but as they grow, we need to gradually step back and let them find their own solutions. And it is not as easy as it sounds. A key to helping you do this, though, might be to find other adults, mentors, therapists, coaches who can help the child transition from parent led support. We can also use technology here. reminders, text-based communication, apps on the phone. So instead of us as parents always being the one with the demand can come from an app. Number two, give choices always. Instead of, for example, put on your shoes, you can say, do you want to wear sneakers or sandals? Or you can even take the question completely out and say, your sneakers and your sandals are both over by the door. And another example might be, instead of you need to finish your homework, you can say, let's set aside some time to work on your science homework this evening. Or I wonder if you want to spend time resting before you start your homework. Number three, watch for learned helplessness. Are we doing too much for them? Are we speaking for them when they could speak for themselves? Are we putting them in charge of our feelings? And that one's kind of tough. But it's important to understand kids are not responsible for our adult emotions. We have to manage our own emotions and our own reactions. So, what does that mean? That could mean, it could sound like opening the car door at school and saying, make me proud, don't embarrass me. You've just put your child in charge. Or, why do you have a stomach ache again? I'm so frustrated. Again. Or, can't you try harder? Look how upset your dad is. Again, that's putting the child in charge of the adult's reactions and emotions. And kids, they just don't have the mental capacity to be able to handle this. It's way too much. So let's move on to number 4, which is balance power, not a hierarchy. And I think if you have a PDA kiddo, you know this. With PDA kids, it's not about parent being in charge or adult being in charge. It's about creating a partnership and collaborating. But it's also okay not to give your power away, so to speak. So we are their safe container. We're not their servant. Sometimes it feels like that. Sometimes we do things that really might look like that, but it should very much be in a supportive role. We need to strike a balance with this. And this is often a very big concern for PDA parents. And I'll talk more about this in an upcoming podcast because it is a big topic with a lot of misunderstandings attached to it. But I can tell you from lived experience that you can find a balance. I think of it like a dance, right? So you push forward gently to find out where that line is between hard and too hard for the child. And if you listen to Amanda Diekman, she talks a lot about that. There's a point between hard and too hard. You want to challenge. You want your child to grow. But remember, we're raising adults here. We don't want them stuck, at age 8 with 8-year-old skills. We want them to keep growing and gaining skills. But we also, especially with PDAers, we have to be very careful of the too hard. So if you think of it as a dance, right, there is one step forward, one step back, 2 steps forward, maybe 3 steps back. But we are continuing to move forward, even if it's slow. And that really leads into number 5, which is shift your own expectations. And this, my friends, seriously is the foundation of everything else. If we expect traditional milestones, we're going to always fall behind. This is where we need to do our own work. We need to learn how to manage our grief around unmet expectations of what we thought our parenting journey would look like. And we need to truly, truly see the reality of the child who's in front of us. We want to also focus on progress and not a timeline. Okay. So I feel like we talked about a lot today, but if you take away one thing from today's episode, let it be this. Our PDA kids don't choose to feel trapped. Their nervous system reacts that way. And the best thing we can do is to create an environment that feels safe and gives them autonomy. And as parents, we have to find ways to break our own cycle of feeling trapped as well. And remember, you are not alone in this journey. All right, friends, until next time, again, thank you so much for showing up for your child, and remember that you are exactly the parent they need.